While Muslims continue to argue the president's foreign policy is fostering a more vocal Islamophobia here in the U.S., it's especially problematic for women who wear traditional garbs, which they say makes them targets for hate. Jessica Formosa gives us a look right now at life here in New York through their eyes.
I'm a professional woman who works. I'm a mom. I'm a community advocate. I'm someone who basically does a lot of the same things that they do, except that I wear a headscarf, a hijab, and that I am of a Muslim faith.
Dr. Debbie Almontasser is a community activist, leader, and founder and CEO of Bridging Cultures Group. She was born in Yemen, and at the age of 3, her family came to the United States. They settled in Buffalo, New York in the 1960s. She recalls her father telling the family they would be just like everyone else.
And so when growing up, I was in a secular Muslim family. We didn't, pray. We didn't know when the holidays were coming.
It wasn't until middle school that Almontasser started to get a better education about her faith and traditions. One day, she decided to wear a hijab to school.
I went into a social studies class, and my teacher basically said to me, "Why are you wearing that thing on your head?" And I looked at her like I was so surprised why she even, pointed it out. And she said, people here don't wear that. That's a sign of oppression. And women in the other part of the world, in the Muslim and Arab world who wear it, are oppressed. You're in America. You're not oppressed.
She says she went to the bathroom and took it off. The next time she connected again with her faith was when she moved to New York. Almontasser was 19 at the time.
I saw the vibrant, incredible diversity in people being able to be themselves. And is when I started to do a lot of soul searching of my faith, what my purpose was, and I then embraced Islam through actually the African-American Muslim experience.
The community activist met 3 African-American Muslim women.
6 months into my joining these women and learning about Islam is when I made the conscious decision to live a spiritual life as a Muslim woman, where I started to cover my hair and pray 5 times a day and make the choice to raise my children as Muslim.
She's been wearing a hijab for about 30 years now.
It is a part of our religion, and I think what's really important for people to know watching this is that it's a woman's choice. It's not a man's choice. Though we worship 5 times a day through prayer, I find that wearing my hijab is a form of worship that I do everywhere I go publicly.
Even though she hasn't been discriminated against, she admits people stare at times.
Stares of intrigue and curiosity, and maybe once or twice I sense a little bit of tension in some of the stares. There are days when we hear political rhetoric that is anti-Muslim that I seldom fear for myself and my fellow sisters who are hijabis in New York City.
Jessica Formosa, Fox 5 News.
Jessica, thank you very much for that report. Joining me right now is Afaf Nasher, who is the Executive Director of the New York chapter for the Council on American Islamic Relations. Afaf, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We were watching this very personal story from Dr. Debbie, talking about her life, her sense of values, and she also talked about fear. And that's something that I'm sure you hear a lot about, especially with your work. Tell us about that.
Sure. Definitely there is a sentiment of fear throughout the Muslim community to an extent, mixed with this strength and hope for better days and resilience that is always there. But for good reason there is fear. And if we really look at statistics, hate crimes have surged more than 550%.
Yeah.
Really, even the Southern Poverty Law Center, just within 10 days after President Trump's election, saw over 900 biased crimes throughout the nation for all different nationalities and ethnicities and faiths and races.
Right.
And so really hate crimes are up with everyone, and it's a concern that no one can ignore.
And you hear so many stories. I mean, I know you talk about young women who feel that, they're being picked on. They're being un-American. They're living here in America. Why are you dressing this way? Why are you acting that way? How are they dealing with these problems? You know, in schools, for example, how are they dealing with this?
Well, in particular in schools, what we've seen, and because the focus really is on girls who are identifiably Muslim through wearing the hijab, the traditional headscarf, what we've seen is that 29% of girls are bullied for wearing a hijab. They've experienced some sort of offensive tugging or pulling on their hijab.
Right.
We've seen even of those hijab-wearing girls in schools, 27% of them relate feeling some sort of discrimination, not just from their peers, but even from administrators and teachers.
And how painful and how difficult that is for them to face on a day-to-day basis. There are more than 3 million Muslims living in the United States. Where do they find their strength? What do you hear about those stories? Where does that come from?
They have to find their strength within their faith, within their family, within their communities, and also the countless supporters who are also there saying, look, you're in America. Our entire country is based on religious freedom, and you are welcome to practice your religion freely. And while we do tend to focus on the ugly side of all of this hate and bigotry and prejudice that we're seeing, there's so much of the hopeful message that really we identify with as Muslims. And you know, Ernie, you talk about assimilation, and you talk what it means and how it really translates to the human experience.
Right.
I've seen a young teenager girl literally break down in tears because she was in a situation in which she wanted to display her faith proudly by wearing a headscarf.
Sure.
And at the same time, she was taunted and bullied so extensively because of her decision that she ended up having to make a decision to take that headscarf off, which later made her feel so guilty for giving in to the taunting.
It's understood. It's understood.
So it's really a double-sided dilemma for them.
So, Afaf, tell me quickly, what can be done? What we need to do? You know, people talk about misconceptions, misunderstandings, the media's role in this thing. What can we do?
Everyone has a role to play. Within the Muslim community, we have to be better at projecting our own narrative rather than having the narrative conveyed for us. And that means reaching out to people who perhaps have never met a Muslim for the first time.
Sure.
On the individual level, every individual has a responsibility to seek out truth rather than really just absorbing what is being fed to them, especially propaganda.
There you are.
And that is readily available, whether you go to a mosque or a masjid, whether you try to meet someone or go to a library, or even, you know, go to your own churches and find out the commonalities between all the Abrahamic faiths.
Afaf, Nasher, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you
very
so
enlightening.
much,
Come back again, okay?
I will.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Okay, a lot more coming up.